All right, so I'm going to use today's recap to tell the story of the day as opposed to trying to like spoil it at the very beginning. That way you can kind of try to get the tension, the drama of what happened on today's TGP. So starting day 3, we had Echo in first, tied with Mandatory. You know, they were about a minute and a half separating these two teams. Every other team looked like they were battling for, you know, this third place slot, with Dragon's Guild team starting in this third place slot. Okay, this is fine. So we have a final day's key that's yet to be revealed. It's kind of unclear as to what it could potentially be. It was in between Noku Defensive, Ruby Life Pools, and Azure Vault, so it was definitely going to be one of those three. There's also a question as to what affixes it was going to be. We learned that it was an 18, starting at 18, Fortified, Afflicted, Raging, Azure Vault. This is pretty atypical to TGP. TGP normally runs 3 Fortified, 3 Tyrannical, so this was a bit of a surprise, I think, for some of the competitors. Yeah. So with that being the key that we're going to see today, I think it's pretty easy to assume that we're going to be looking at this key to be done on a 23, and then teams to have some time to then maybe go and do like one chase Bracken Hide if they would like. Because that's kind of what we saw whenever day 2 was ending, right? We saw how close Mandatory was being able to get that 22 Bracken Hide. It seemed like it was maybe something they could do on the table if they got a couple attempts. But of course, this is going to require quickly being able to get this 23 Azure Vault done, because I've seen teams be able to time this key during practice attempts. As to how long it's really going to take and how consistent these teams are going to be, that's up for debate. So, you know, the teams start out, they're looking pretty good. I don't think that I necessarily want to talk about the drama. And first, I actually want to kind of talk about one of the cool pieces of tech that we saw. And it's actually from Echo in the bottom right here. Now sets up a pull that's really cool and pretty atypical, and it's a snap pull. And what he does is he jumps down to this bottom platform, he grabs all the trash that's on this ring, and then he'll Wernstone up to the top. And what this allows them to do is to do a pull that pretty much every other team did in 2 separate pulls in one. Obviously, Miscount actually ended up doing the snap later on, the same as Echo, but every other team, aside from them, did this pull in 2 pulls. And so this made Echo's pacing in Azure Vault to be the fastest team by a significant amount. This plus like a first pull of the dungeon that was very spicy and caused them a ton of wipes. Those are the 2 things that really set Echo up to be able to time this key really fast. And they did the 22 with the fastest time. Mandatory had a few deaths in their 22. However, moving forward, everybody times with 22, which is fine. Mandatory then goes into a 23, and their first attempt, look at how much time we have left in the rest of the day. It's about to get insane. Mandatory is looking to one-shot this 23 Azure Vault, which I didn't think was possible, but they were able to one-shot this 23 Azure Vault. Except they weren't. So what happened is they actually have a crystal go off, and the fracture dot ends up killing everybody off. As you can see right here, all of these crystals are actually pretty low, and they get 4 stacks of this fracture dot, and it kills all of them. And they wipe halfway into their day, 33 minutes into the time, and we're like, wow, that's unfortunate, but they can surely get back in time. You would think that. Meanwhile, in the top right here, Echo on Laymore is kind of a question as to how Echo's going to do. Echo, unfortunately, had a bunch of wipes. They wiped to pretty much everything you possibly could in the first half of this dungeon. I think this pull now snaps with a Wernstone here and just gets completely clapped by this trash pack. In addition to that, the first pull of the dungeon that I was talking about a little bit earlier caused 100,000 deaths to Echo, because the way that Echo does their first pull is they grab additional trees and more lashers than pretty much any other team. And with it being this Raging Affix set, it's just really hard. If they don't get like the God Soothe, basically they wipe and die. And so that caused Echo a ton of wipes at the very beginning, but you know, occasionally, at 1 in about every 6 or 7 runs, they were able to get that dealt with. And as you can see on the bottom here, there's a lower third that we had. And then at some point, and so hold on, let me show you where we were. We were halfway through the day whenever I showed this, 2 hours into the broadcast. Now we're skipping ahead to 4.5 hours into the broadcast, and you see the lower third there at the bottom. Resets in Azure Vault. Echo has 25, Mandatory has 16, and Miscount was 7. So Miscount, whenever we go back to the start of the day, was very far behind, right? They were at 102 points. They got stuck in Oldemon prison on day 1. I thought that there was a chance that they weren't even going to be able to get top 3. I thought that a 3rd place was going to be a 1st place finish for Miscount, looking at how their day went. However, they made it to they got some points put up on the board. They were able to go and get the Halls of Infusion done on a 21 with pretty good speed, and they were able to actually get into this Azure Vault. Then we were at a point where they were at 126 points. Echo and Mandatory were both at 128 points. So, and this is actually a very interesting decision, because then we're at a spot where if Miscount times the 23, and then they're able to go get a +1 from this Neltharis, and Echo nor Mandatory were able to actually time the key that they were in, then Miscount could potentially win. And that happened. Miscount was able to time their 23, and they time it rather quickly. I want to say, only took like 7 or 8 attempts at being able, I think 8 attempts in total, to actually be able to time this key. And as you see right here, they were the first team to actually put up a 23 Azure Vault in the world. So they were able to get this world first Azure Vault 23. And that is massive for them. I think everybody was kind of writing them off as like, I said at the very beginning of the day, a 3rd place finish for Miscount would be a first, considering where they were coming from, because they were fighting from very far behind. And I mean, look, dude, they were cooking through the Azure Blade split. They had an insanely fast Azure Blade split. 2158 is a great split for that boss. Yeah. So then after they time that key, they're in a position to where they can win. If you look at the top right here, all they have to do is neither Echo nor Mandatory time this Azure Vault 23, and then they get the point from this Neltharis 21. If they're able to time this key, then they're in a great spot. However, Echo, not to be defeated, actually timed their 23 Azure Vault. Of course, key level is the big tiebreaker metric. It's not just time tiebreaker. If all of the scores across the board are equal, then we go to time tiebreaker, and it happens sometimes because these teams are so good. But key level is the big trump card. And Echo are actually able to time their 23 Azure Vault. It took them like 30 progression pulls. There was a lot of wiping to the first pull, but they were eventually able to get it, and they one-shot Umbral Skull. Unlike Mandatory, they were able to get this boss dealt with first try. Very dangerous boss, by the way. Then Mandatory basically is only playing for second here, because they have the worst time tiebreaker by a significant amount. They would have needed something in the order of like a 35-minute. They would have needed something in the order of like a 35-minute Azure Vault to be able to beat Echo's time tiebreaker. Unfortunately, they could have beaten Echo, I think, if they were able to get their Azure Vault 23 dealt with pretty quickly, but instead they kill their Azure Vault 23 at the very end of the day. They were 30 seconds off the timer or something like that whenever they were able to get this dealt with. So still an incredible run. I thought that they were going to win the TGP after looking at their Ultimon, and after their day one, I thought they were going to be able to win the TGP. So basically, Echo is locked up first. Mandatory is locked up the potential to come in second, but they've definitely locked up second here. And Miscount had this happen, and I'm just going to play the audio here, because this is they're in this 21 Neltharis, and from Miscount's perspective, they think that they're praying that Echo and Mandatory haven't timed their key, because they actually don't know what has happened, and they know that they needed to time this 21 Ultimon. And so look at Warlord Saga, 3%, 41 seconds on the board. They only need 7% count, but the count's on top of the pack. And so let's listen to what exactly happens for them at the end of this run.
Left, I think they have just enough time to finish off these trash mobs. I think they're going to do it.
I think so as well. I think Miscount are going to be able to actually put this key on the board, which is going to throw all of that energy back over to Mandatory now, who have to succeed in this 23 vault. They hit that lust. They are now in that next
Echo.
crystal burn. Echo wiping in the bottom left. So they still are going to be first place. They're still locking it up, but the 3 world record dream is over for Echo. 15 seconds to stop the clock for Miscount. They still have 3 trash mobs alive that they need to kill. Oh, but Mandatory, are they going to be able to kill all these crystals? 3 of them still alive. Looks like they have managed to get through this set. 1 more crystal set, and 2 minutes and 15 seconds left for
Miscount! Oh my god!
No way.
They missed the count! What? Yeah, so they missed a bird. Basically, there are these birds that fly around in Neltharis, and they can kind of be obnoxious. And I don't know what the fuck this route is, but there are these birds that you actually end up getting, that these are one enemy forces, and they just unfortunately didn't grab one whenever they were doing their chain pull, and they missed count because of that. And that concludes the season of the TGP. Echo coming in first, Mandatory coming in second with 2 minutes and 12 seconds of time tiebreaker. We'll never know if the 22 Brackenheim was doable or not, unfortunately. But I think this was a great season of TGP. No eliminations in the finals was insane. Holy shit, I'm completely exhausted after casting this just incredible day of TGP competition. I thought that the fact that the storyline about Miscount potentially being able to win with 128 points, if neither Echo or Mandatory were able to put up that 23, with them being the first teams to actually put up that 23 in the world, that was just an incredible finish to the day. Big shout out to all the teams. Big shout out to Pedro's Per Hour, Dratna's Guild Team, and Madge. Having 2 NA teams in the top 6 is definitely something to be happy for. The NA pride and joy. Let's go lock in. All right. Anyways, that's it for this season's TGP recaps. Hope you guys enjoyed this video series, and I hope to see you guys next TGP. I'm going to start doing a lot more dungeon content as the expansion comes out. So if you like dungeon content, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye.